So good morning once again. From today we will start with our module first, that is nature and application of Hindu law. So in the brief introductions of all modules, we come across with the fact that Hindu law is a mixture of codified as well as uncodified law. So being the part of uncodified law, it cannot be called as a law what today we call to the modern law. In the modern time, law is understood in a different sense. Different sense means to say it is only law which was enacted by the parliament or state legislature as per the procedure observed into the Constitution of India. So Hindu law is partly cope up with the characteristics of modern law, but some of the part is a traditional one or not a law in the modern sense. So that is uncodified law, which was emanates from the religious text, custom and usages observed by the Hindu community since ages. So these two consist a Hindu law. So we can say that some of the part of Hindu law is not passed by any legislature. For example, the joint Hindu family system in the family law. Second, we will deal with that as well as law relating to partition, co-parcenary system, etc. So it is therefore is a mixture of uncodified and codified law. Similarly, the uncodified part is presumed to be or considered as divine in nature, or it is of divine origin. Divine origin in the sense it is derived from the Vedas, and Vedas are the revelations of the God Himself. So it can be called as a branch of dharma, that is the duties and rules of conduct. It is a branch of dharma, that is the duties and rules of conduct. So that's what it is called as divine origin. Divine means propounded by the God. As per natural law theory, law emanates from the God, or source of law is morality. On that sense, Hindu law is divine law because it is considered as a branch of dharma, and dharma here means the duties and rules of conduct propounded by particular religion. Therefore, what is followed by those who are learned in the Vedas and what is approved by the conscious of the virtuous who are exempt from the hatred and inordinate affection. Now, these wordings are derived from the Manusmriti, that in short or in simple words, whatever stated by the pure person, whatever stated by the pure persons is considered as a dharma. Now that is considered as a law. Pure person in the sense those who are conscious or they were exempted from hatred and inordinate affection. So they act without fear or favor. Those persons were called as virtuous, or whatever said by the virtuous, that is dharma. That's what it is, a branch of divine law as per Manusmriti. So it is, in other words, Hindu law is a set of rules contained in several Sanskrit books, which the Sanskritist considered as a book of authority on the law governing the Hindus. So this is the ancient form of Hindu law. But today, because of the Constitution, which was came into force on 26 January 1950, and therefore law in the Indian soil were enacted on the basis of the Constitution of India. So the Hindu law was also codified on that line, and today the picture of Hindu law is different. The large portion of Hindu law is now codified. Hence, we can say again that Hindu law is a mixture of codified and uncodified law. So the codification was started with the Hindu Code Bill prior to commencement of Constitution itself, but they get ready to be enforced after commencement of Constitution. So four legislations among Hindu communities were codified, and rules relating to all these aspects which were scattered into custom and usages were collected, consolidated, and they were codified into four different statutes. Those statutes are: first is Hindu Marriage Act of 1955, second one is Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act of 1956, third is Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act 1956, and Hindu Succession Act 1956. So these four legislation together consist of a Hindu Code Bill or codified legislations among Hindus. So up to this, we can say that this is the nature of Hindu law. Now we have to move towards the application of Hindu law. Application in the sense to whom Hindu law is applicable. Now, in codified legislations, you will find section 2 generally very short title and extent, as well as application of any codified statute is given. And it was stated that therein that this law or this act was enacted on particular date. This act is called as such and it extends to such and such territory as well as such and such persons. So here, Hindu law being personal, religious law, of course, the basis of its application is religion. So first answer is Hindu law is applicable to those who are Hindu by religion. That's what we have to see. Who are the Hindus and to whom those who are qualified for this definition, the Hindu law is applicable to them. So we will see this picture in prior to codification and after codification. Codification in the sense prior to Hindu Marriage Act and after Hindu Marriage Act, who were Hindus. So similar definition or concept of Hindu is similar. So first answer to whom Hindu law is applicable is Hindu law is applicable to those who profess Hindu religion. Therefore, the question is who are Hindus? So first we will see Hindu by religion because two persons can be a Hindu. One is Hindu by birth, who is born as a Hindu, and second is Hindu by religion because those who are not born but subsequently converts to Hinduism, they were called as Hindu by religion. So first we will see who are Hindu by religion. So in this category, two types of persons form. First, those who are originally Hindus, Jain, Sikh, Buddhist by religion. So four communities were considered for application of Hindu law as Hindu. Apart from Hindu, even Sikh, Buddhist and Jain, they were also clubbed with the Hindu for application of these four legislations. Hindu Marriage Act, Adoption, Minority, Guardianship, Succession, etc. So they were Hindu. Secondly, those who are converts or reconverts to these four branches, Hindu, Jain, Sikh or Buddhist by religion. So if any person originally Hindu converts to Muslim, later again convert to Hinduism, so both converts and reconverts were considered as Hindu by religion. So there was one judgment in converts and reconverts. They were also called as Hindus. Supreme Court in Perumal versus Ponnuswamy, 1971 Supreme Court. It was held by the Supreme Court that a person can be a Hindu if, after expressing the intention of becoming a Hindu, he follows the custom of the caste, tribe, or community, and the community accept him. Such person can be considered as a Hindu by religion. Or even the Kerala High Court in Mohandas versus Devasavan, in the year 1974 held that mere declaration and actions are enough for becoming a Hindu. No other formalities are required. If any person expresses his intention to become a Hindu, then it is sufficient to consider him as a Hindu. So first segment we seen, that is Hindu by religion, wherein all those persons are considered as Hindu. Secondly, Hindu by birth. Here, directly a person who born into Hindu family is a Hindu by birth. So here, a child whose both parents are Hindu, Sikh, Jain or Buddhist at the time of his birth is regarded as a Hindu by birth. So a person will be a Hindu if at the time of his birth one of the parents are Hindu and the child is brought up as a member of Hindu tribe, community or Hindu family. In other words, he was brought up in the Hindu culture. Then also, even though one of the parent of child is Hindu, the child is considered as a Hindu by birth and ultimately Hindu for this law, for application of this law. The third segment is who are not Muslim, Christian, Parsi or Jew. So inclusive approach is adopted almost by every religion, not here in Hindu, but even in Muslim law we are going to observe the same. That inclusive approach in the sense those who are not following any other religion, they were included. They can be considered as a Hindu. So third segment says those who are not Muslim, Christians, Parsi or Jew. So any person who is not Hindu, Parsi, Jew and who is not governed by any other personal law, then he is Hindu unless it is proved that Hindu law is not applicable to such person. If applicable, no doubt he is a Hindu. So three categories we had seen under uncodified law, wherein person can be a Hindu. One is Hindu by religion, one is Hindu by birth, second, third one is who is not Christian, Parsi, Muslim, Jew by religion. So that was the picture under uncodified law. Now, under codified law, the definition of Hindu is given definition in the sense to whom Hindu law is applicable is given. Now the definition is given in Hindu Marriage Act and in all other law it was stated for application read section 2 of Hindu Marriage Act. So same definition was made applicable to all above four legislations, be it a Hindu succession, minority, guardianship, adoptions, etc. This definition is applicable to all four laws. So, under codified law, that's what we see. Codified means having sections. For earlier, we had said no sections. Now, for the first time, we are going to study the section because for the first time or it is the first instance we are referring to the codified law, that is Hindu Marriage Act. So section 2 of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 provides that this act is applicable to the person listed below and these provisions are also applicable to other enactment relating to Hindu. So first we will see the application of the act. So again, same thing were repeated because this definition was drafted on the basis of meaning of Hindu under uncodified. So section 1, application of the act, it was stated that this act applies clause A to any person who is Hindu by religion. So same in its any form or development, that is it including Virashaiva, Lingayat or follower of Brahmo, Prarthana or Arya Samaj. So now it is little bit religious. We have no options for that because the subject itself is religious up to few sections. So secondly, to any person who is Buddhist, Jain or Sikh by religion, now this factor is taken from uncodified law. However, Virashaiva, Lingayat and follower of Brahmo, Prarthana, Arya Samaj were included herein. Third and most important is to any other person domiciled in the territories to which this act extends and who is not Muslim, Christian, Parsi or Jew by religion. So third aspect from uncodified law is covered here. Unless it is proved that any such person would not have been governed by the Hindu law or by any custom usage as a part of that law in respect of any of the matter dealt with herein in this act had not been passed. So, in short, the person who is not follower of other religion. So, uncodified law was codified by this section. So, here important is what is meant by domiciled, because clause C says to any person domiciled in the territories to which this act extends. Domiciled, ed, domiciled prior. Now he is residing anywhere. Suppose American person who was domiciled in India, but today residing in America, then Hindu law is applicable to him if he is a Hindu, if he qualifies the above conditions. So Hindu couple having origin of India, migrated to USA, reside there, then for them Hindu Marriage Act is applicable. So we can say here Hindu Marriage Act is having extraterritorial operation, or territory is not the factor to made applicable Hindu Marriage Act. So religion is the factor, and the nexus between two is established by the domicile. If that couple never domiciled in India, they don't have domicile at any moment of time in India, then they will not govern by the Hindu Marriage Act. So the test is they were domiciled in India, then only it is applicable to them. Otherwise, they will not govern by this law. So again, there was a judgment on this aspect, that is domicile. Those who are living abroad but they are having domicile of India, Hindu Marriage Act is applicable to them. The name of the judgment is, take down, it is Sondar Gopal versus Sondur Rajni. The judgment is delivered by the Supreme Court in the year 2013. So AIR 2013 Supreme Court 2678. In this case, it was stated by the Supreme Court that Hindu law is applicable to those who are domiciled in the territories to which this act extends, means India. And now those who are outside the state territories to whom Hindu Marriage Act is applicable. So we can say here Hindu Marriage Act is having extraterritorial operation, and the judgment is Sondur Gopal versus Sondur Rajni, AIR 2013, Supreme Court 2678. So by this way, we had seen that what is the application of Hindu law. Application of Hindu law is territorial on the basis of religion as well as extra territorial if there is a nexus of domicile between the person and between the Indian territory. Then explanation was given to these sections wherein list was given that who can be considered as a Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Sikh religion. Same thing is repeated, that is any child, legitimate, illegitimate, both of whose parents are Hindus. So children were made Hindu by this explanation, even though children is legitimate or illegitimate, but if his both parents were Hindu, Jain, Sikh, Buddhist, they are Hindus. Secondly, any child legitimate or illegitimate, one of whose parents is Hindu, provided the child is brought up as a Hindu. See, the test is if one of parent is Hindu, the condition is the child must have been to be brought up in a Hindu culture. Then only the child is Hindu. and any person who is convert or reconvert to Hinduism as already stated. However, as per say, clause 2 of section 1, the government may issue notification and exclude certain communities from scheduled tribes from application of these laws, and that already schedule circular can be issued as per Article 366, Clause 25 of the Constitution of India, and the notification has to be published in the official gazette. If any community from the scheduled tribes is excluded from the purview of Hindu Marriage Act, then they are not governed by Hindu Marriage Act. They are free to observe their religious customs, community customs, etc. So by this way, the Hindu Marriage Act is applicable, or application of Hindu Marriage Act can be studied. We are not going to much details of the application because from exam point of view, this aspect is not material. But from the practical point of view, if you want to de-apply any particular legislation to any particular person, then you may say that he is not Hindu if you are able to establish these factors. And once a person cannot be considered as a Hindu, he cannot claim any benefit under these legislations, be it a validity of marriage, be it a maintenance, be it a succession, most importantly. So that's what, in this way, the concept is important. So, if you have any queries on the concept of who is Hindu, you may refer to other books like Book of Paras Diwan, if available in soft copy. Try to search. I will forward some books in Google Classroom, e-books. You can also read those. Now, do you have any query on the concept who is Hindu? So we can move towards the sources of Hindu law. Please comment in chat box. No. Is it, you feel, is it something religious? This topic is not religious, but once we go to the sources and schools, then prohibited degrees, Sapinda relationship, etc., those topics are religious. So let's move further on the sources, because in introductions we had discussed many things. So sources of Hindu law. Now the term source, I think you have presentations. Is it in front of you? As I stated earlier, that from tomorrow try to keep the presentation in front of you, so it will be get easy, because through Google Meet it is not possible, and that too through mobile it is not possible to share both the thing, my view as well as presentation. Either I can show the presentation or my view, but it is better get the access to presentation through classroom and listen here. So sources, the term sources is used in several sense. Are there were several connotations of the term source, what source means. So source is authority. One connotation of source is it is authority which issues rules of conduct and which were recognized by court as a binding. So source we can say authority. So sources of Hindu law, in the sense what is the authority for Hindu law, where from this Hindu law emerge. In other words, who are the maker of law, then sometimes social conditions which inspire the making of law for the governance of the conditions are also the sources. That's what custom are nothing but the social conditions. Certain customs are of certain kind, therefore it results into making of law. For example, custom of sati results into prohibition, negative connotation. That customs results into prohibition because that custom is opposed to the public policy, morals, even law. But certain customs were accepted, like Saptapadi among Hindu marriage, Vivaha Homa is accepted. So social conditions, maker of law, authority which issues rules of conduct, they can be called as a sources, even cause of law. Cause of law, the material from which law is known. Then even evidence of law can be considered as a source of law, or the what evidence is accepted in the jurisprudence for making of law, that evidence itself become the source of law. So it is necessary to study the sources of law because in every legal system, only that rule is law which has its place in sources. Because if the source of law itself is challenged, then the law will not be considered as valid. If the source itself is illegal, unknown, then that law cannot be accepted. Today, moral principles, law emanated from God is not accepted because God is not known. Authority, existence of God cannot be established likewise. That's what natural law theory later opposed by positivists. So, rule not laid down or not recognized in the sources is not a rule of that legal system because base of law is important to survive that particular law, rule. Now we will go to the different sources of Hindu law. Of course, as per syllabus, the sources of Hindu law are divided as ancient and modern sources. Ancient word itself indicate that it is religious and modern after commencement of constitution. So ancient sources are again religious, based on religious principle, Vedas, etc. That is Shruti, Smriti. Later we are going to see what Shruti is, what Smriti is. Then digest and commentaries, Puranas and customs. So these are five ancient sources, and the modern sources are justice. Modern sources even today they were relied upon. So ancient sources today may not be relied upon because while enacting the law, the all customs were abrogated which were inconsistent with the codified legislations. So modern sources are justice, equity, and good conscience. Now this phrase we left to discuss during introduction. What justice, equity, and good conscience is. It is the self-conscious of the judge which is to be applied while deciding a case. Whenever there is any question before the court and on which there is no law expressly, neither custom nor any express legislation, the judge himself has to apply his own conscience and decide the particular case. That is called as, those principles were called as principles of justice, equity, and good conscience. What is desirable in the interest of justice, that has to be done. Then second is precedent, that is judicial decisions, and lastly the legislation. Now legislation is a supreme source in the modern times, that is parliament of not only Hindu law but even every other law. Now we will see in detail what the ancient sources are. The first ancient source is Shruti. Shruti means the word is derived from the root word that is Sru, S-R-U, which means to hear. So Shruti, yes, Vedas they were heard, but prior to that, Vedas come later. First, Shruti means to heard, listen, aikne. So Shruti literally means what is heard. Remembered that is latter. Smriti means remembered. Rushikesh. Shruti means heard and Smriti means remembered. That is our second source. Hmm? So Shruti means what is heard. असं जे काही ऐकलेलं आहे ते. So Shrutis are believed to contain the very words of God. And it is believed that the rishis and munis had reached the height of spirituality where they were revealed the knowledge of Vedas. Now, this is belief. Whether to have belief in this or not is a different fact. But this is accepted that certain rishis and munis, because of their spiritual knowledge, they were reached up to this height or up to such extent that they heard what whatever said by the God. So, Shrutis are nothing but the whatever heard by Rishis and Munis from the God. That is called as Shruti. So that's what it is religious. Existence of these things were later challenged that how one can heard from the God. Sorry. Even in Muslim law, we are going to observe the same passage that Muhammad Paigambar listen the verses of Quran from the Allah. So on same concept here also. This is the similarity between Hindu and Muslim law so far as sources are concerned and relation between God and human being is concerned. So the Shrutis are nothing but the words of God which were heard by the Rishis and Munis because of the spiritual knowledge they possess, because of the knowledge of Vedas they possess. So they are supposed to be the divine utterances to be found in the four Vedas. And now those words which were heard by the rishis were later converted into Vedas. They were believed to be Vedas. Vedas, the four major Vedas. Therefore, the Shrutis are nothing but the four Vedas. The four Vedas are Rig Ved, Yajur Ved, Samved, Atharva Ved. So today we will stop here. Yes. And the latter sources, that is Smritis, Purana, commentaries, that we will see tomorrow. Again, read the present.